We need to pay more attention to performance. Unfortunately, too many people, teams, managers, leaders, and organizations are simply not performing at optimal levels. Poor performance most often occurs because there's a cognitive capability mismatch between people and their specific roles. Our cognitive capabilities enable us to perform by solving the inevitable problems and challenges that we will face in our work. The greater our cognitive capabilities, the more able we are to address complex problems. As organizational positions become more complex and managerial, we need to be able to work with problems of various complexities and to develop effective solutions to these complex problems that may span anywhere from one day to several years. While we all have some level of cognitive capability, performance will suffer if there is a mismatch between our actual capability and the capability requirements of the work that we have to do. When these problems remain, performance declines. In this presentation, we will explore the relationship between cognitive capability and performance, the definitions of cognitive capability and cognitive scope, the relationship between cognitive capability and organizational structure, the cognitive differences between organizational layers, how mismatches in cognitive capability can hurt individual, team, managerial, and leadership performance, how relating cognitive capability to organizational structure can help you, how to identify the cognitive requirements of a position, ways to evaluate the cognitive capability of managers and staff, how to determine the future capability of personnel and how to identify high potentials, and finally, if we can develop cognitive capability in order to fit the requirements of a position. Superior performance will be sustained over time when a person has the combined technical skills, which are the necessary educational background, specific technical knowledge, and relevant industry experience, as well as the non-technical skills, otherwise known as soft skills, that are required for performance success in their specific position, with their team, their manager, and within their specific organizational culture. At CAES, we group these non-technical skills into the various categories, such as cognitive capabilities, thinking preferences, motivation, concentration skills, productivity traits, communication skills, interpersonal skills, emotional intelligence, and leadership and managerial skills. But what we find is that since cognitive capability is so important, it needs to be separated out of these non-technical skill categories. And so our formula now becomes the person needs both the technical skills, the non-technical skills, and most importantly, the cognitive capabilities in order to be able to function in their specific role. I think it would be helpful to provide some definitions regarding cognitive capability and cognitive scope. Cognitive capability refers to how a person handles information complexity. It's their ability to recognize interrelated patterns in seemingly unrelated information, and it's the complexity of a series of actions that a person can plan and think through. The greater a person's ability to handle information complexity, the greater will be their ability to think ahead, to envision and consider various options, to strategize, and to formulate the most effective solutions to problems. Cognitive scope refers to how far into the future people can make meaningfully detailed plans for complex projects that involve many elements and activities. We often refer to this as vision. When we think of effective leaders, these people are able to develop a realistic future vision, and they're also able to provide a clear picture on the key interrelated issues that influence their vision. Finally, the ability to conceptualize and to envision multiple possibilities greatly expands a person's scope level. It is critical to understand that a person's cognitive capability and cognitive scope must fit with the cognitive requirements of their specific position in their organization for performance success to be experienced. Those people with capability below their positional requirement will be overmatched, and unable to perform at a suitable level. Those people with scope that is significantly above the positional requirements will be bored, feel underutilized, and see little value in interactions with their immediate supervisors, and this results in poor job satisfaction and poor retention. We need to evaluate a person's ability to plan, think strategically, analyze problems, and anticipate consequences of their actions relative to their position in the organization. Problems become increasingly complex, solution time horizons, cognitive scope become increasingly longer, and errors more noticeable at each higher organizational level. A major contributor to poor performance occurs when there is a mismatch between the individual's cognitive capabilities and the cognitive requirements of their position. Leaders will not be able to formulate a realistic and effective future vision if their cognitive capability and scope is insufficient for the requirements of their specific role. When there's a capability mismatch, it will have a negative impact on both the individual's performance and on everyone who is directly connected to them. When many people in a group do not have the cognitive capability to fulfill their responsibilities, the negative impact spreads exponentially throughout whole departments and organizations. Since the cognitive scope required for each position increases as you go up the organizational chart, mismatches of people's capability to the demands of their position will have an increasingly negative impact on greater numbers of people. Low capability managers negatively impact their teams, and it becomes noticeable when the CEO does not match the capability requirements of their specific role. People with low performance capability often spend more time justifying poor performance than affecting change. This becomes even more evident in both managerial and organizational performance when people are not held accountable and when organizations are subject to high competition and economic stress. Change-resistant managers will not only slow the evolution of their own personal thinking and development, they will fail to encourage and facilitate change in others. So it is critical to be able to measure an individual's ability to plan, to think strategically, to analyze problems, and to anticipate the consequences of various courses of action within the context of the requirements of their respective position. Too often, we mistakenly continue to overemphasize the need for technical skills in order to facilitate performance, while we neglect to give appropriate additional focus to the proper matching of non-technical skills to managerial and non-managerial roles. The most critical non-technical skill is cognitive capability, and appropriate levels must be present for performance to be achieved, whether it's in individuals, teams, managers, leaders, and entire organizations. Looking at a basic organizational chart can help us to understand the specific differences in organizational complexity. In this example organizational chart, we can see some obvious levels, and we can refer to each level in this hierarchy as a stratum. Depending on the size of the organization, there can be anywhere from 1 to 8 identifiable stratums within its hierarchy. We can further subdivide each stratum into 3 substratums, high, medium, and low, to help with more detailed evaluation. The world's largest organizations, like our example, will have a total of 8 layers of complexity. But since not all organizations are equally complex, not all organizations will require the same number of layers. Understanding that many organizations have different numbers of levels enables us to adjust our evaluations based on the size of the organization. As we move from the bottom of our organizational chart, stratum 1, to the top, stratum 8, the complexity of problems, the information required to evaluate and understand them, and the time horizons for their potential solutions will increase. And since complexity increases as we move up the chart, so will the need for increasing cognitive capability in the people occupying each layer. At each higher stratum, the positional requirements will become more complex and managerial. So it should be obvious that people with significant cognitive capability and cognitive scope become increasingly rare as you move up stratum levels. Stratum 5 people are rare enough, but stratum 6, 7, and 8 level people become increasingly hard to find. In this example, we can identify a number of stratum-specific titles, but since all organizations are not the same size, the number of layers present, and therefore the positional titles that we apply, will be different. Even in a self-described flat organization, there are still various levels of complexity. They're just not as obvious because they have not been similarly labeled. Regardless of organizational size, there will always be some number of layers that will require the ability to work with problems of increasing complexity as you move from the bottom to the top. For example, a first-level manager has much more to consider and contend with than their direct report, as does the manager above them. And the complexity of the problems faced and the solutions required are totally different for the worker on the floor as compared to the organizational CEO. Similarly, when we compare organizations of different sizes, the cognitive requirements of the CEO of a 4-level organization are not as complex as those for the CEO of a major multinational. All CEOs are not the same. And we should not assume that just because a person occupies a specific position in any stratum, that they have the correct cognitive capability to perform effectively. We have all seen poor performers at all organizational levels. We can also see that for each stratum, we can identify the required cognitive scope that would be necessary for performance to be achieved. Just as complexity increases with each rise and layer, the time horizons required to sustain effective solution to complex issues will lengthen as well. Again, these horizons will span anywhere from a few days to several years. While the number of organizational layers can be variable between organizations, in most cases there can be a consistency in scope requirements as you move from the bottom up. This means that typically people at the lowest organizational level will require a cognitive scope of at least 1 month to 3 months. If this is the case, then stratum 2 people will require a scope of 3 months to 1 year. Stratum 3, 1 to 2 years. Stratum 4, 2 to 5 years. Stratum 5, 5 to 10 years. Stratum 6, 10 to 20 years. Stratum 7, 20 to 50 years. And finally, stratum 8, 50 plus years. That said, it is possible that some organizations, due to the nature of their work, will have a lowest level that requires stratum 2 or 3 capability and scope. If this is the case, the next higher levels must have the correspondingly higher capability as per our scale. And we can also say that a one-man organization can operate at a higher cognitive level than stratum 1 based on the capability level of that person. It's also helpful to understand that some stratums will require either an internal organizational focus or an extra-organizational focus. As a result, depending on the stratum level, there will be a greater emphasis on either managerial or leadership capabilities. We will also see some general tendency in different thinking preferences at different stratum levels. People at the lower 4 stratums will often be more focused on the internal aspects of their organization. Their main concerns are towards productivity, product and service quality, operational efficiencies, and short-term profitability. These people will tend to think more concretely, preferring to attend to specific examples and occurrences that relate more to real-world issues in the now. As we move up from stratum 1 to stratums 2, 3, and 4, we'll generally observe increased managerial and leadership growth. People in the higher 4 stratums will often be more externally focused, especially at the highest stratum levels. Hopefully, these people delegate managerial functions so that they focus more on pure leadership activities. Since they're often more abstract thinkers who are able to perceive larger scale relationships and to make analogies that concrete thinkers may not readily see, they tend to be more future-oriented and often more open to experimentation and risk. It is important to note that while a degree of leadership can be present in all organizational levels, in smaller or mid-sized organizations, there needs to be an appropriate balancing between leadership and managerial activities, as well as flexibility in thinking preferences, especially around stratums 4 and stratum 5. Let's now look at each stratum in a little bit more detail. We can best define stratum 1 as operational quality. The complexity level at stratum 1 can be described as people performing routine work where they're given instruction, they're told how to perform, and they're aware of what standards are being measured. Here, direct supervision will be common, especially when people are learning new tasks. and we would not expect that people will anticipate problems, and when an obstacle is encountered, they will often seek help. The cognitive scope at this level would be from 1 month to 3 months, and the outcome objective would be to find excellence in their work and find ways to improve process, products, and services. Some examples of Stratum 1 positions would be office staff, shop floor operators, sales clerks, police officers, front-line clerks, cashiers, and tellers. And to define their role, they may provide the following feedback. I mind my own business, that's management problems. I'm more comfortable asking so I don't get into trouble. And since it's my job, it would not be right for a supervisor to do it. In Stratum 2, there's a growing focus on operational service. At this level, we see people as being more proactive. Their focus is on operations, so they're real-world oriented and they pay attention to concrete details. They accumulate pieces of information to diagnose and anticipate problems, and they ensure that all required information is obtained before making decisions. Because their focus is information-based, they become more aware of trends. People in Stratum 2 will have a cognitive scope of 3 months to 1 year, and here their outcome objective becomes effective coordination between people and processes, collective improvement, and overall increased efficiencies. Some example positions here could be first line manager, supervisors, customer service manager, small business owner, or a district manager. And these statements may be representative of a typical Stratum 2 outlook. I notice that downtime has increased, and I think I know a few reasons why. Or the gearbox has been making noise, so we need to find out why before it stops working. Stratum 3 is best defined as operational best practices. Stratum 3 is typically the link between the organizational membership and the operational managers of the organization. People at this level are focused on the effective use of human resources, finances, and technologies. They will plan and complete tasks that require a series of sequenced steps, while at the same time considering contingencies and alternatives. Focused on group interaction, often Stratum 3 people know all of the people below them, and in some cases they are professionals with high technical ability who manage a few technical reports. The cognitive scope for Stratum 3 is 1 year to 2 years, and their outcome objective is focused on developing effective work practices, systems, and productivity, and the facilitation of breakthrough changes. Some example positions for Stratum 3 would be a manager of managers, department heads, workshop managers, multi-store owners, regional managers, unit managers, sales managers. And finally, they might be defined by this statement. We need to analyze the market first, then we can develop a market strategy, make modifications to the product, and then decide on an advertising approach. What happens if our chief competitor releases a similar product before us? At Stratum 4, we tend to see a shift towards organizational strategic development. Here, overall organizational goals are continuously kept in mind and at the forefront. Stratum 4 people often assume a divisional level role, and they focus on ensuring that the work done is within the framework that they have developed. They often manage multiple interdependent serial projects, ensuring that the resources and activities involved are balanced between sequential paths. As a result, they are able to ensure the appropriate distribution and utilization of resources among a number of departments. Stratum 4 cognitive scope is 2 years to 5 years, and their outcome objectives are focused on facilitating longer-term innovation, change, and continuity, and short-term discontinuous change. Some example positions for Stratum 4 could be a general manager, a director, large-scale project manager, plant manager, a lab manager, and even a line leader with diverse constituencies. Stratum 4 could be best represented by, to achieve his 3-year expansion targets, the general manager must balance the growth of sales and distribution, the development of new products, and the construction of a new production capacity. Stratum 5 takes us more towards strategic intent. People in this stratum actively make plans for the future of the entire organization. Since at this level there is an increasing need for externally focused leadership, Stratum 5 people set, or at least actively contribute to setting the tone and the direction that the organization will follow in upcoming years. In some cases, within larger organizations, Stratum 5 people focus on optimizing the function of a single business unit or corporate support staff. The cognitive scope for Stratum 5 is 5 years to 10 years, and their outcome objective is establishing the organizational direction, identifying purposeful challenges, the maximization of organizational assets, and ensuring a positive return on investment. Some Stratum 5 positions may be a large company divisional executive, the VP of a business unit, production directors, or the president CEO of a 5,000 plus people organization. And a Stratum 5 representative outlook could be, we must think in terms of the total business system and achieve a 4% increase in ROI for the organization. Stratum 6 can best be defined as corporate citizenship. Typically found in larger organizational structures, people in Stratum 6 are focused on making a difference in industries in another country and having an effect on national policy. They are accountable for achieving a cumulative impact from a number of different independent business units. Stratum 6 people will have a cognitive scope of 10 years to 20 years, and their outcome objective is to transform their vision into reality and to build a strong national and worldwide presence. Some sample Stratum 6 positions would be the CEO of a 20,000 plus people organization or a corporate executive VP. And a representative outlook might be, it is crucial for us to observe the external environment and project where the business will need to be in the future. An appropriate definition for Stratum 7 would be corporate presence. Here, work is performed on a global scale. Stratum 7 people construct and pursue worldwide strategic plans, and the decisions that they make relate to the establishment of the organization in the global environment. The cognitive scope for Stratum 7 people is 20 years to 50 years, and their outcome objective is facilitating new forms of social, political, and economic institutions, and also ensuring prosperity. Some example Stratum 7 positions would be the corporate CEO of a Fortune 500 organization or very high-level civil servants. Their representative outlook could be, what do we want our organization to be within the next 20 years? Finally, we would define our extremely rare Stratum 8 as impacting global values. Stratum 8 people construct and pursue worldwide strategic plans for the largest of the world's corporations. Their cognitive scope is 50 plus years, and their outcome objective is ensuring their organization's contribution to societal change and evolution. The Stratum 8 position would be a super corporation CEO, and their representative outlook would be, how can we change the world for the better? I should mention that these Stratum definitions were developed by Professor Elliot Jacks in his work in Requisite Organization. As we've discussed, capability matches have tremendous implications for operational growth and efficiency, internal human resource planning, internal mobility considerations, developmental initiatives, and succession planning. Again, it's critical to remember the need for direct matching between a role and capability and what can happen when capability mismatches occur. Here are some examples. We can say that people at Stratum 1 can reliably carry out procedures, but since they may not yet have the ability to see the larger picture and anticipate resultant problems, when placed in a Stratum 2 role or above, they will be overwhelmed and underperform. In another example, a person who is required to operate at a Stratum 1 level, but who actually has Stratum 2 capabilities, will likely be frustrated with the lack of opportunity to address the problems that they do anticipate. If they're ambitious, they will be open to moving to a more challenging position, which will hurt talent retention and will upset any established succession planning should they move outside of the organization. On the positive side, the characteristics that would make the Stratum 2 capability person bored and frustrated in a Stratum 1 position are the same that should be factored into any evaluation when considering whether to promote this person into a first-line manager role at Stratum 2. Here's another example. Let's say an organization has a project involving the development of a new company-wide software package. In order to write and implement the plan, someone with cognitive capability of at least a Stratum 3 level and a scope of 1 to 2 years will be required. A person with Stratum 2 capability will struggle with our Stratum 3 project, since the required time span would be beyond their cognitive capability and scope. At best, they might come up with a plan based on their more comfortable shorter time horizon, anywhere from 3 months to 1 year, but they will miss the longer-term plan considerations. As a result, they will fall short of the most effective implementation and long-term sustainability of the plan. If we gave the project to a Stratum 4 capability person, they would likely be bored with our Stratum 3 level project and possibly be less effective due to making errors of omissions along the way. At best, they will only be able to create a plan that may be too complicated, too difficult to implement, and too hard to administer by the people with Stratum 2 capabilities. For the project to be successful, we need to match a person with Stratum 3 capability to a Stratum 3 project. Mismatches in managerial and leadership capability will hurt performance as well. People are attracted or repelled based on the quality of their manager. One of the major causes of performance decline, job dissatisfaction, and poor retention occurs when an employee feels that their manager does not provide them with value. Value is created because the manager, occupying the next higher level stratum, has greater cognitive capability. As a result, they will be able to handle greater information complexity, to see its interrelatedness to the larger picture via their longer cognitive scope, and then translate this into effective management of their direct report. This value is reflected in the manager providing the talented direct report with what they need, typically guidance, mentorship and advice, challenging work, opportunities for growth and development, upward mobility options, autonomy, and fair remuneration. If the manager's cognitive capability is equal to or less than the people that they manage, their subordinates will not see real value in the relationship, and they will seek out managers who will give them what they need. Depending on the level of their cognitive capability, a manager will either increase, maintain, or decrease the performance of their respective department or organization. Let's say a position requires Stratum 4 capability and a cognitive scope of 2 to 5 years. If the manager has Stratum 3 capability and a subsequent scope of 1 to 2 years, they will effectively decrease organizational or departmental performance. If the external environment and economy is positive, the performance decrease will be slow. But if the external environment and economy is negative, the decrease will be much faster. Should the manager have a low Stratum 4 capability with a subsequent cognitive scope of 2 to 3 years, they will be able to at least maintain performance. However, if the manager has a high Stratum 4 capability with a subsequent cognitive scope of 4 to 5 years, they will be able to increase organizational or departmental performance irregardless of the external environment. Relating cognitive capability to organizational structure will help you. When we can measure job complexity and then match human cognitive capability to the identified requirements, we can more effectively evaluate people's overall performance capability at all organizational levels. Evaluate external employment candidates regarding their ability to handle specific levels of complexity to help us decide if they should be considered for specific roles. More capably assess internal talent for promotions, identify high potential personnel, and create more effective succession plans. Identify those people who will actually benefit from overall performance enhancement programs and develop more effective leadership development programs that are specifically appropriate to each organizational level. Make direct comparisons between the complexity level of positions within groups, across departments, and throughout the overall organization. Have a measurable and consistent basis for assigning appropriate compensation to a role and aligning compensation between organizational levels. And finally, be more effective in organizational design and development. Using this model can help us determine how many layers your organization should have for maximum effectiveness. Some organizations have more layers than necessary, and some have too few. In either case, the wrong number of organizational levels can create performance problems, reduce efficiency, and hurt profitability. We need to be careful to not assume that the current number of levels is appropriate, and this model can help us to be adaptable and objective in our analysis. It's important that each organization develop its own specific hierarchical chart to provide general guidelines as a point of reference. Once developed, it can be used to specify per-level requirements to help in cross-level comparisons and to assist in any movement decisions between levels. So how do we determine the capability requirements for a position? If people are to perform effectively in their respective roles, when evaluating each position, we will need to be accurate in our determination of its cognitive capability and cognitive scope requirements. It is crucially important to determine the requirements of the position first, and then determine if an individual has a suitable capability match to what is required in both the short and long terms. Again, to achieve desired performance levels, there needs to be appropriate cognitivity levels as well, no more and no less. So in general, we first need to formulate the intended positional output as precisely as possible. We need to analyze what work will be required and how it will be performed to achieve the required output. Using a task target completion time formula, we need to try to identify the longest task, project, or program that is anticipated among all of the tasks. Then we need to ask the following specific questions about the work. Can the work be done by following an assigned plan to a goal and overcoming obstacles by direct action as you meet them along the way? Does the work to be done first require the articulation and accumulation of data, which is judged to be significant for the desired output, and then require a diagnostic judgment based on linking the data? Does the work to be done require the use of serial processing, the construction and choice of a plan that balances future requirements against current activities, and then holding in reserve other plans that might be necessary if the selected plan does not work? Does the work to be done require a number of interactive projects to be undertaken and adjusted, with each project considered in relation to each of the others? Does the work require continual touch-feel sensing of how changes occurring anywhere in a project can impact upon the system to which the project is related, and which would lead to direct actions that must take into account the probable, immediate, and downstream consequences that will cascade through the whole system? Does the work require a continual screening of the relevant business environment to identify and favorably influence any and all developments which might have significance for the projects at hand? Does the work to be done require the development of worldwide strategic options and the creation of additional business units by growth, acquisitions, mergers, or joint ventures? And finally, does the work to be done require an understanding of long-term societal needs and the capability to position the organization to have an impact on societal change and development? So how do we determine the current cognitive capability of managers and staff? Assuming that we have accurately determined the cognitive capability requirements for each specific position, we can then take steps to evaluate if each individual has the necessary capability to suitably perform at the corresponding stratum level. It is critical to be able to measure an individual's ability to plan, to think strategically, to analyze problems, and to anticipate the consequences of various courses of action within the context of their respective position. The challenge for the person assessing cognitive capability is that while specific capability and scope requirements for a position can be difficult to determine, the ability to identify their presence in an individual is even more difficult. There are no quick identifiers. We need to move beyond the typical intuitive decisions that are inaccurate when evaluating what makes one person more capable than another, and also understand that there are no appropriate written assessment tools to properly answer our questions regarding cognitive capability. The only way to assess current cognitive capability is through careful questioning and response evaluation, and in some cases, the use of sophisticated performance simulators. Appropriate supportive assessment tools may be helpful in verifying the results obtained from direct questioning, but they can never replace the effectiveness of personal interviewing. While we can begin our interview evaluation based on individualized questions that are adapted to the person's specific experience, cognitive capability is best assessed via more generalized, complexity-specific questions that do not allow for a person to fall back on and refer to familiar past experience. The questions should not be focused only on the desired capability level, but rather should be fairly open so as to enable the respondent to elaborate on whatever their capability level actually is. By devoting appropriate time and asking questions in different ways, we can ensure that there is consistency in responses. Once the questioning is finished, we can then use our predefined stratum scale to make a direct comparison between the position capability requirements and the person's ability to fulfill them. Further, by referencing position-specific tasks as defined within the framework of capability and using them as a more detailed guideline, we can further elevate our evaluation confidence levels. We can chart the results of our cognitive assessment interview and compare it to other sources of information. In this chart, we can first see our cognitive scope levels, and then within the chart, we can see some measurement categories that are cross-referenced with the respondent's age. The first category shows the subject's self-report via written assessments regarding the longest project that they had worked on and their age at the time. In this case, the results can be misleading, as while the project duration may have been in the 2 to 5 year range, the subject's actual participation may not have been for the total duration, and the complexity of their contribution may not have been this high. The second measurement is also a self-report, wherein the subject has been asked questions regarding what they perceive to be their planning horizon at their current age. In this case, the response was 3 months to 1 year. While this is their perceived cognitive scope, it does not accurately portray their capability in handling complexity. People typically struggle to provide accurate feedback on these questions, as they sometimes underestimate their cognitive scope, but more often they overestimate their scope. The third measurement is the most important. It shows the subject's actual cognitive capability at their current age based on the CAES interviewing process. Here we are more comfortable in the accuracy of the evaluation because the questioning is focused on information complexity rather than being based on the subject's past experience. Since the interviewing process relies less on a person's self-reporting, we effectively reduce any lack of self-awareness and remove inaccurate answers that are based on what people would like us to hear or where they would prefer to be. Finally, by knowing a person's current cognitive capability and age, it's possible to predict with reasonable accuracy when their capability will grow into the next stratum, or when they will reach medium or high levels within their current stratum. Knowing this will enable us to determine when they are likely to be ready for a higher level of complex work activity and increased managerial responsibility. We can also use this knowledge to identify high potentials who will be more capable of moving up the organizational chart, and as well to determine those people who will be more comfortable in remaining in the same role for longer durations throughout their career while they develop their expertise. In the case of this specific subject, their cognitive capability is not only significant, it is significant for their current age. And because of this, we would be wise to identify them as being a high potential. It can be helpful to also cross-reference a person's thinking preference with our cognitive evaluation, since we find that people occupying the upper stratums will have a tendency towards more abstract thinking. In this example, our subject has a nice balance of abstract and concrete thinking, wherein they will be able to relate big picture thinking to real world issues. I should also mention that random thinkers tend to envision an end result and then find ways to work towards it, whereas sequential thinkers tend to take a step-by-step approach towards a solution. This subject's random thinking preference implies that they are comfortable in setting goals within their cognitive scope and then finding practical methods to achieve them. We can also compare people's cognitive capability to other people within a team, a department, or an organization. This comparison will not only help us to determine if we already have the right people in the right positional levels within the organizational hierarchy, it can also help with the hiring and selection of external personnel and deciding who within a team or group should be identified as higher potential for promotions, who would benefit from performance enhancement and initiatives, and in evaluating whether we have effectively structured the organization's overall succession plan. In our example chart, we can see 5 subjects of different ages with differing current cognitive capability. Our previous individual example has been included, and when we compare the group's current capability at their current ages, we can see how this individual stands out and that they will reach a higher capability level faster than all of the other subjects. It should be noted, all of the subjects in this example are suitable performer in their current roles within the organizational hierarchy. Our example individual, subject 5, has exceptional cognitive capability. Finally, we can also identify cumulative results for the group that show averages for current age, current cognitive capability, and potential capability. Can we develop cognitive capability to fit the position requirements? We are able to determine when a person's cognitive capability will grow to the next level because we know that everyone's ability to handle complexity will increase in a predictable manner as they age. Cognitive capability initially develops in late adolescence, and it will grow over a person's lifetime. But we do not all start at the same level. As a result, some people begin their careers with differing levels of capability, and each will grow their capability from these various starting points. So some people will grow to higher levels than others. But a method to significantly accelerate cognitive growth has not yet been found. No training or developmental program will help to significantly stimulate growth, so growth will only occur naturally. At best, initiatives to increase abstract thinking may help to stretch capability within a stratum from low to medium to high, but they will not enable capability expansion beyond a current stratum. Additional education and developmental initiatives do not accelerate cognitive capability, but they are still valuable in providing a person with more information and tools to use within their current stratum level. Since cognitive capability growth cannot be accelerated, to achieve optimal performance, it is critical that we ensure that a person's cognitive capability matches with their specific role requirements. If a person does not currently have the ability to handle complexity at the level required for a specific position, they will not be able to suitably perform the work. No amount of training, coaching, or personal development will substantially change their cognitive capability. And waiting for somebody to grow into a position is foolhardy. The best approach is to first appropriately match the right person to the role on the basis of cognitive capability. Then ensure that there is a suitable technical and non-technical skill match to the role. If it's acceptable, provide additional relevant non-technical and technical skill development along the way to further help them to grow other capabilities that will enhance their performance, and then offer them more demanding challenges and responsibilities as their cognitive capability naturally grows. In summary, a person's cognitive scope will determine how far into the future they can make meaningfully detailed plans for complex projects that involve many elements and activities. There's a direct relationship between a person's cognitive capability and their performance, so it's crucial that a match exists between the cognitive requirements of a specific organizational role and those of the person filling it. Identifying organizational stratums enables us to create comparative structures and to better identify the requirements at each level. Complexity increases as you move up the organizational chart. Internal operational focus and concrete thinking preferences are more likely to occur at the lower stratum levels. Extra organizational focus and more abstract thinking to occur at the upper levels. This form of organizational structuring can help you to maximize effectiveness, to make comparisons and work complexity, to develop more effective leadership development programs, to assign appropriate compensation plans, to assess internal talent capability, to identify and develop future successors, and to match internal or external personnel capability to your requirements. To be effective, we need to be accurate when we determine the capability requirements for each specific position. We can use our stratum definitions to assist in determining the level of task complexity. Cognitive capability must be directly matched to cognitive requirements, no more, no less, to avoid the all too common mismatches that hurt performance. There are no quick solutions or simple assessments to determining the current cognitive capability of personnel. We need to ask appropriate questions in order to conduct an accurate evaluation. We cannot accelerate capability to fit position requirements. People's capability will grow over time, but developmental initiatives will only be able to maximize a person's capability within their current stratum, not beyond it. Based on age and capability, we can determine the future capability level of personnel, when they will be able to assume more complex problem-solving activities, and when they will be ready to assume higher-level managerial responsibilities. And finally, I want to thank you for spending your time with us. Cognitive capability assessment is a part of every service that we provide. CAES can help you and your organization with cognitive capability evaluation, leadership and management development, assessment and selection services, multi-level performance enhancement and coaching, retained search, recruitment and executive search, strategic HR planning and organizational design, succession planning, and in some cases, individual career development services.